I should note that I'm gonna keep my phone on, and it's here, and it may ring and stuff, and you know, whatever comes up on this phone is probably not gonna mean anything, but I'm gonna look every time because my wife is very pregnant. So,
okay, let's hope that we have 60 minutes without your wife giving birth.
There's like a non-zero chance that I might have to dash.
We figure something out. Then we all move to the hospital together. David, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really great to have you here. It's exciting to have you back in town, and maybe let's go all the way back to your start and your history, because you're actually not from Copenhagen. You're from Iceland, a very remote place. How is it to grow up in Iceland?
That's a good question. It's a pretty civilized place, you know. I lived there until I was 10, and then my mother moved to Denmark, and I moved with her, and I lived here for 22 years after that. And then I moved away to San Francisco for a while, and now I'm back. So I've been here for 2 months now. I say I can pass for a Dane, you know, with the language and stuff. Iceland is a funny place. It's very small, right? There's only 300,000 people there, and it's. But even there, like there's a sort of a, you know, now I mean I wasn't part of that, but now there is a sort of a startup ecosystem that's starting to get created.
Yeah, the only tech company I would otherwise think of is maybe CCP behind EVE Online, right?
Yes, there's a few good ones that are not sort of in our sort of, you know, software space maybe so much. There's like, you know, a company that does like machines to kind of cut fish, but very high tech machines. Like it's a real tech company with sensors and AI and stuff, and a few others. I'm also I work with a company called Plain Vanilla. They do an app called Quiz App.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about it a little more. But if you think back those 20 years in Iceland, so it's this remote place, not many tech companies around back then. What is kind of the setting you're coming from? When does technology come into your life?
I mean, my mother bought a PC. So I'm born in '77, right? So my mother is in '87 buys a PC, and I immediately knew I had to do something with this PC. I didn't know what. It had like a broken basic installation. So I spent, I don't know how many hours trying to figure this broken basic installation out that basically, you know, would crash whatever you did or something. But I tried to get some games. There was almost no games on PC back then. So I figured I had to write my own game. So I went to the library, got a book about, you know, teaching yourself to program. But it was all Commodore stuff, but I didn't really understand the difference. I was trying to type in these peaks and pokes, and they didn't work. And but somehow I learned to program when I was like 11, 12-ish.
And that is kind of where the passion started for technology and for games.
I guess, I mean, like most people that like start programming early, it seems the passion was there before. I don't know, but I mean, where did this mysterious passion come from that drove us to sit in front of this computer until we figured out there was something to do? I don't know. I mean, actually the CEO of CCP, that's the game company, he has the same experience. You know, he knew he was like 10 or 11 or whatever he was. He knew he had to buy like whatever, you know, I can't remember, a Spectrum or something. I mean, he knew that he had to buy this weird computer, but he didn't know why. I don't know if other people have that experience. It's just what was in there. I don't know. But yeah, so I learned to program. I wasn't like the best. I was pretty clever.
Is there any kind of entrepreneurial traits in your family?
No, not at all. Like they're all like scholars and civil servants. Well, yeah, no. My brothers though are all like with three brothers. We're all entrepreneurs somehow.
And then you moved to Copenhagen and started, I guess, studying. And actually, I've seen that you studied quite different stuff. And maybe you want to tell us a little about it. And I don't even think you finished your studies, right?
I dropped out 4 times. I didn't finish anything. I can't even put the points together and make fake a bachelor's degree. It was almost nothing. I have some points, but I mean, they're like.
So I read you studied psychology and Arabic.
So I started with. I wanted to study cognitive science. I studied psychology in Copenhagen. It was very humanistic, which I didn't respect back then. I kind of do a bit more now. So I wanted to do the science of the mind, you know, which turns out to be rather elusive. And then I went to sort of, when that didn't really interest me, I went to sort of the hardcore stuff, which I'd always been planning, which was physics. So I studied physics for a while, and then
no message from the hospital.
No, sorry. And then I dropped out of that. I was kind of depressed, so I decided to take the very opposite. I went as far in the university system that I could, which was Arabic and Middle Eastern studies. I think also like in the building, like it was the furthest away building in the University of Copenhagen. Karsten Niebuhr Institute. So I studied there for a year. I really enjoyed that actually. I could have stayed there if I felt. But then I decided to go back to computers.
Yeah, but you never thought about studying something more tech-related, computer-related?
No, I did actually enroll to computer science later. But that I had started Unity at the time, and I think I was only there for like 2 weeks. And I realized I didn't have time, so I dropped out again. So I count 4 dropouts, but it's a bit of a definitional question. No, I mean that's just a stupid story. I think what was maybe slightly sort of learnable is that I was super lazy. I was super confused. I didn't finish anything until I sort of found my company, and Unity really brought me up. I was such a I was not a useless guy. I was pretty clever, and I was passionate about stuff. It wasn't like I cared about stuff, but when I was studying, when I was supposed to be studying Arabic, I was studying Hebrew. I don't know why. It was just always wrong. I was always doing the wrong thing, but then this company, it was so kind of.
So that was in 2003. Unity kind of started, but even before, I've read that you you had a couple of gigs, some even revenue, making revenue.
I started a few companies that really are there's nothing to be proud of. I think I count sort of 3 to 5 companies, and 2 of them kind of had revenue. One of them may even actually have been registered with the authorities. But it was really boring. It very quickly became a consulting company, which bored the hell out of me. But I learned a lot. I worked for Nokia for kind of a year and a bit. And that was a great company at the time, and they had a great engineering culture, and they really respected the craft of programming. So I'm very happy I went through that.
And then Unity came somehow around.
Well, I mean, one of my friends wanted to make games, and we had these ideas that. He's a very philosophical person, and somebody I respect greatly. But he had some, actually together. But I mean, more of the ideas were his than mine. But we were thinking about why are games kind of not so compelling a medium for us anymore. We loved games. We played games since we were kids, and we're like, why are they so stupid? And we're like, the conclusion was somehow that all games at the time, and mostly still, if they refer to reality in any way, actually, they only use it as a sort of backdrop against which to shoot people. So very kind of, not engaging with the world in any meaningful way. So we're like, we gotta make a game that changes that. And we had these very idealistic visions, and we wanted to make games that would teach people stuff and educate. They're not educational games, but teach about the dynamics of conflict and all this stuff. So we were going to start a company. I started another company. He sort of made this game stuff for a while. He met a German guy online. They decided to collaborate on the tech, and had some very naive ideas about that. So let's say I have half a code base, you have half a code base. We have somewhat different goals, but it's sort of a game engine in both cases. Let's merge them because we'll have now 2 people working on the same code base. But the complexity of the code base is now going to be 5 times. So I mean, the whole equation doesn't work out. But they decided to do that, and then they sort of invited me to be the 3rd kind of founder guy. And
then I guess you just clicked, and eventually all moved to the other 2 moved to Copenhagen, and you've been Copenhagen based for a while.
Yes, I mean one of them was already here. We went to high school together. We smoked weed together and programmed and listened to Pink Floyd.
That sounds like
the German guy moved here, and so Copenhagen, Unity was sort of founded in Copenhagen, although you might say it was virtual before that. And you could say the founding team is together in 2003, January, but we were actually kind of working for a while before that. Yeah. Cool. And first we were going to make games, and then we realized that we had this passion for the tech rather than games, so we sort of switched that. And we dropped all these idealistic games, which is kind of sad, but instead now, actually all these games have now been made by other people on Unity, so it's kind of neat.
So that's kind of you're kind of happy about that?
Plus, these games we had ideas for, they didn't work out as businesses. So we dodged that bullet.
So, talking about the business, so you guys started in 2003. How did you kind of get that up and running and survive and get to the first product version? Because that was only launched in 2005.
Yep, summer, yeah. So 2.5 years for me and 3.5 or more years for the others, yeah. That's a good question. No, seriously, we don't really remember. We think it had something to do with not eating. We had basically no income for years. I did work in a cafe for 1.5 years, which was good because it sort of paid the rent and I got free food there. And I got my entire sort of social.
Does the cafe owner now have shares in Unity as well?
You know, honestly, he probably should. I met him the other day on the street. He sold his cafes, now works somewhere else. But yeah, he was very generous. Like he let us kind of eat his food, and you know, I probably should give him something. But he. And the good thing is I'm a very social person, so working in front of a computer like 24/7 was kind of not possible for me. So I would work really a lot, and then I would go to the cafe and kind of work, but it was just hanging out with people and talking. And then I could go back to the other job, so it was...
And that's kind of how you financed the first...
that was for me, and then one of the others, my old friend, he would program like websites on weekends, like lawyer, doctor websites, kind of, you know, stuff that you could actually charge for back then. Now it's like Squarespace.
But it was only 2009 and they actually raised institutional...
yeah, so we tried to raise money from Danish VCs, and I don't hold it against them in any way that they didn't invest. It was a very unclear why this would work, but I mean there was some interest, and we talked to some good people, and they didn't want to invest. And we took loans from the bank. We borrowed like from the bank and family. We borrowed approximately, it must have been like 700,000 kroner from various sources. Plus, we probably had another few $100,000 of sort of unpaid tax bills and overdrafts and stuff like that.
Okay.
So it's probably $1 million that we were in sort of together, right? Which is a lot of money, but it's, you know, 3 young programmers. I mean, it's not unsurmountable to pay that kind of money back. You can actually do that. It's going to be a few dreary years, but I mean, it's doable.
What was the challenge that you were meeting with the Danish VCs back then?
Oh no, I mean, the challenge was not the Danish VCs. The challenge was just that we had no idea what we were doing, and you know, I mean, we couldn't explain why this was a good idea, and objectively it was a bad idea. Like there was no market, the product was shit, the competition was pretty entrenched, and we were surrounded on both sides by lighter products, open source products, and heavier, more advanced products, which is just kind of an impossible situation to be in. I mean, we sort of defined the marketplace a bit differently. So we defined ourselves at an edge, but in actuality, if I look sort of rationally back at it, we were kind of in the middle, which is, well, clearly not provably a bad idea. Always bad, but it's tough, right?
One of your good friends, Nicola Nyholm from Sunstone VC, he told me that he was actually not allowed to invest, and now instead you're very good friends. So.
Oh, he's always bitter about that thing. That's very silly of him. That's like 2011, you know. He way lost the boat on that anyway.
So that is after you raised from Sequoia in 2000.
Yeah, totally. I mean, he wanted to do it doesn't matter. I mean, he's a good friend. I love the guy dramatically a lot. But no, I mean, like, okay, so we built this product. We borrow, like, let's say it's 1 million kroner, sort of roughly, from various sources, including slightly illegit sources. Like, you know, you really should pay your tax bills. And we didn't quite. I mean, we paid, everything is settled, and with all the fines and all the extra things, it's all good. But I mean, it was a bit edgy back then, I must admit. So then we launched Unity 1.0, which was this, okay, I mean, it's a game development platform. It's sort of an editor for interactive content. And we launched that in the summer of 5, and then...
And you actually launched it at the Apple World Congress, and for Mac only, which is kind of interesting because it's kind of focusing on games. And back in 2005, I mean, the iPhone came in 2007. There was no mobile games, and games were all more or less Windows.
I mean, we managed to pick I think it's called nadir of the platform, the lowest point of the Apple Macintosh, you know, for launching, right? So we launched probably in the moment when they sold the least Macs per day or whatever, right? It's kind of ridiculous. But I mean, again, we were not really business people, and we thought we would make games. We transitioned to software. The tools were Mac-based because we figured, like, we're Mac guys, we don't really care. We're not going to sell this anyway, right? As long as we have a Mac that works, which, by the way, in 2005 was kind of a risky concept. I mean, there might not have been a Mac 5 years later, frankly. But anyway, so we launched that. Scott Forstall was kind of famous. He was the iOS guy for a while. He actually was on stage demoing Unity according to a script that we wrote. For 5 minutes, we thought in the spring of 5 that Steve Jobs would demo the software, but he didn't. And then,
Bummer.
Yeah, no, it was. Fuck. I never met the guy. I wanted to meet him. I had several close brushes with him, but I never met him, and it still breaks my heart. But I don't know. No, so we basically launched Unity 1.0, and we had borrowed all this money, and we ran out of money, and we're basically dead. So Nicholas, the third founder, or I mean, one of the founders, he goes and works for another company for 2 years because he couldn't afford not having a salary. And apparently me and Joachim, we could afford not having a salary.
Because you didn't eat.
Something like that. I had a little bit of money in the bank from the previous company that was not sold or anything, but we had saved up some money from the consulting gigs. And then, I don't know, I literally don't remember.
So that was kind of the first down that you hit. How close were you to closing Unity then?
Huh?
How close were you to closing Unity?
That's actually a good question. I think we had moments where we're like, let's give it half a year more. Let's just see how, I mean, this is not going to work, but there's something awesome about this. The software is kind of cool. So we just kind of kept with it, I guess. And a lot of it was frankly just kind of absolute dog-headedness. So it was basically me and Joachim. We had to fire the other people. We had hired a couple of people. We had to lay them off. So basically me and him in the room. He was programming. I wasn't, frankly, at the time because I was already out of that and doing businessy stuff and support and whatever else was needed. So I remember like there was a period sort of in that 5 to 6 where we were just alone in that room on the 5th floor at the university in this little office, and we had an intern or something that was something there, and it was basically like if we went home early, the shawarma places on Nürburgring, they were still open. You know what early means in that case, right? It's like 3 p.m. or 3 a.m. or something. Yeah, shit.
Tough days.
It was kind of ridiculous, but we had this debt and we had nothing better to do, and we sort of just worked on it. And there was growth, by the way. Every
month, it's really interesting, right?
Every month we sold a little bit more than before. It was not impossible. It just was really slow.
And coming mainly from indies in the beginning, right? Very
just small studios that yeah. We had like a you know, it's not really a word. It should be a word. We had cheapium as a model, right? It was cheap and cheaper. And then we had a few moments of genius, I can say. One of them was that we were looking at the like Nokia phones in 2007, and they actually there was a Nokia phone I think in 2007 that had a 3D chip in it. It was very bare bones. You couldn't do much with it. They were like one day, and then the Nintendo Wii, the game platform we remember for tennis and stuff, came out. And we looked at that and we're like, wait a minute, that's kind of a low-spec machine. It's like, I'm gonna make it up, but like, let's say it's 80 megabyte of RAM shared with a graphics card, 600 megahertz PowerPC processor, and some decent graphics actually, or for that time. And we looked at that and we're like, wait a minute, in 2 years, that's a smartphone. So we're like, if we support that, the Wii, maybe we're ready for the smartphone. So we actually didn't partnered with Nintendo on the Wii, which turned out to be a bad decision business-wise for us, but kind of got us ready for the following year when the iPhone opened up. Yeah. It was not 2 years, but 1 year. Yeah. The iPhone opens up. It has 3D graphics. It has 100 megabytes of RAM, 20 of which are probably allocated to the OS. So it's actually 80. It's the same, and Unity slid right in there, and it was just perfect. I mean, we launched in October, November of 8, and our revenue doubled, and boom, 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 and it really started growing fast. Yeah.
So that was really also when you started to see that mobile is kind of this huge space for you.
And you know, we didn't, and actually that's, I mean, like we had those moments of genius seeing the Wii is similar to the iPhone, which is kind of a cool insight, and a great decision for us to do all these steps to get there. Then when the iPhone actually came out, we're like, yeah, that's really exciting, but you know, we're still like a multi-platform, PC-first engine, so we didn't actually see that bit.
Yeah, also, I mean, the mobile platform kind of introduced this totally new casual gaming thing in a way.
It wasn't totally new, but it was suddenly a very high-growth platform that had that as a sort of primary thing. Yeah.
What did that mean for Unity?
Well, Unity sucked back then, so I mean, like the only kind of game you could make was that kind of simple game. So it was kind of perfect that suddenly there was a platform that had a lot of growth, a lot of developers ahead of that growth. So there were arguably more developers that wanted to make games for the iPhone than there were iPhone games, like iPhones. Sold at the time. Not in absolute numbers, but you know, rationally speaking. So, and the good thing is when you're selling tools, you're sort of selling ahead of the curve. You're selling on the hope and you know, dream of people. You can't keep doing that forever, but you can do that sometimes. And we started to sell to all these developers that wanted to go there, and boom, that worked. And then that was sort of the economic engine that, well, the potential plus the economic engine that then we decided to raise capital, and we were so lucky that it's a longer story, but we got money in, which then became the kind of, money that allowed us to grow faster, expand more, invest more, that finally, after all these years, is now making Unity good. Like, it's actually really awesome now. But that took like 12 years.
What has your strategy been kind of in terms of customers, like going to the indie developers and really kind of growing with them in a way, or?
I mean, that wasn't so much strategy as necessity. Like when we started out, we had these amazing, like I mentioned, sort of basement moments when we were sort of thinking through the philosophy of this. And one of the moments we had was this, when we saw that our stuff, I don't know if we admitted to ourselves that it sucked, but it was definitely simple. And then we looked at the competitors that were all selling their stuff for like hundreds of thousands of dollars per game or whatever. And we're like, okay, we can't charge that much. That so much is clear. But however, our stuff is kind of easy to use because we have this Mac inspiration, yada yada. So, price point isn't just price point is just a field and database, but there's no use in lowering the price if you don't have a simple enough product to be used by many people. However, we can't compete with these guys on their turf. Let's go wide. So we went wide, which ended up having these incredible implications in being able to build a massive community, which ends up being kind of the engine that drives the growth and the sort of robustness of Unity as a platform.
When did you decide on that pricing model?
I mean, pretty early, like back in the basement. Okay. We called it the Macromedia business model back then. It was like professional software, $1,000 per developer, user, whatever. I mean, now it's the Adobe model, except now they went subscription, and so did we. So the world changed, but it made sense for the time, and it was really cheap. $1,000 for that kind of software was massively cheap back then. Later, we raised a round from Sequoia, and we had 13,000 developers lifetime, which we thought was a fantastic number. So we went to freemium instead of cheapium, and the day after we had 26,000 lifetime.
How many users does Unity have now?
Like slightly over 1 million per month active developers, and some 4 million lifetime users or something. That's kind of a meaningless number compared to that.
So back in 2009, at some point, you get the opportunity to get money from Sequoia, which is one of the prime investors in Silicon Valley, and you're moving over there to Silicon Valley from Copenhagen. Mm-hmm. How did that story come? How did that opportunity arise?
I mean, so first we decided to raise money on a very simple premise. We were actually profitable. We were growing, but profitable as in, I'm sure there's a real sort of financial term for this, but I call it sort of growth profitable, which is really just that you have enough money to grow, but you're not really profitable. I mean, because you're always just spending it. And it's a very fragile situation to be in. The higher the growth, the more fragile, because you just don't have time to save up. In fact, you can sort of visualize it like this, right? So let's say you have this kind of revenue line that goes up in some sort of nice curve. Actually, it's more like lumpy. But if you imagine it's sort of more or less like this, you want to have, at some point it would be nice to have like a month of cash, and then at some point you want like 3 or 6 months of cash. Eventually you want more. So that is sort of, it's not quite the integral of the curve ahead of you that you want to save up, but it's close, right? Maybe it's a sort of a trapezoid shape ahead of you that you want to have in cash, because otherwise you can't grow with revenue growth, team and cost. So the thing is, if you visualize that, like, the trapezoid kind of ahead of you, it's a fucking big thing. Like, it's a massive integral of cash, and to save that up from the delta between earning and spending, it just takes forever. So I mean, that was basically the conclusion. And so we went out, we tried to raise money. We talked to some Danish VCs. Autumn of 2008 was a really bad time to raise money. Some of you were too young to remember, but there was like a financial crisis back then and stuff. And everything was falling down, and it was terrible. So we talked to Danish VCs, Nordic VCs, European VCs.
Icelandic VCs.
No, actually no. And then we started getting inbound interest from the US, where there were still VCs with cash, and kind of believing in, yes, there's a financial crisis, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And so Sequoia had this thesis like that they sort of wrote on the wall in there, mobile, developers, games. They had these kind of macro theses, and I was traveling over there, meeting VCs. I met a pretty amazing woman, kind of randomly, called Diane Green, who was the founder of VMware, the software company, massive software company. That she grew herself from like a handful of founders until there were 7,000 people or so. And she totally fell in love with Unity, offered to be an angel investor, which she was, and then introduced us to Sequoia. And I walked in there with a pretty well-polished pitch. I had a business that kind of worked, and we were growing quite fast. But on top of that, and I didn't realize this, I walked into sort of a, 3 of their big trends kind of together, right? And they loved it. So they had some worries about it, because rightly so, they worried that you could only sell a $1,500 piece of software to so many developers, and when you multiply that out, to sort of somebody coming from Denmark, that sounds like a pretty awesome big number. If you're in Silicon Valley, it's not. You could conceivably have let's say $200 million of revenue per year on that kind of platform. Conceivably, I mean, in a sort of an incredible situation. And since very few people hit that, you scale it down, and you probably end up with a thesis that this business could not have more than $50 million per year of revenue, which from Sequoia's perspective is kind of shitty. But they were like, okay, it's a strategic asset, it's in the middle of these trends, who knows what's going to happen? These guys seem to have it together, let's let them run with it. So they invested a few $1 million.
Yeah, 5.5. How does it feel? I mean, coming from Copenhagen and being through all those ups and downs, and then seeing traction on the platform, and having a product, and then pitching in front of Sequoia, and actually getting funding and deciding to, okay, now we're moving to San Francisco. Mm-hmm. What kind of how did
I don't know. I mean, it was just pretty amazing. No, it was incredible, and honestly, I don't think we understand. I mean, I know we didn't understand kind of what was going on always. I was the only person who moved. Like, we kept the engineering team here in Copenhagen, and so we had a small team there already, kind of a marketing, presence, evangelist team. So I kind of moved there, joined that. We built it out some more. Made a lot of mistakes. Communication between kind of me and Silicon Valley and the team in Copenhagen was pretty bad. I wasn't able to always convey kind of what was going on, and the thinking, the type of thinking that they kind of do over there. So a lot of kind of mistakes that I made, and we collectively made, but I made many of them personally. And but the good thing is, we had such kind of a tailwind from a business perspective that a lot of these kind of mistakes were kind of just sort of fix themselves by growth. Growth will fix almost all your problems. I mean, it'll create a few more, but just most things are fine while you have growth, and we had a lot of growth. And then we learned to communicate better, and it started making sense. And then I met Nicola Nyholm, and he wanted to do a B with us.
And then he said no, but we can become friends instead. And
I have great respect for him. In fact, he worked very hard to get that done. It's just in the end, we took money from China instead, and Singapore.
Interesting markets too. Have you ever considered moving the company as a whole to San Francisco, or was it?
No, it wasn't an option. I mean, even by the time I moved there, we already had a lot of people in Copenhagen, and we had people in Lithuania, and we probably by the time we might have had people in Brighton already, I think. So we were already kind of distributed, so we just went with it, and we're very distributed.
Yeah. And you still have the biggest head count in Copenhagen.
Yes, yeah, it's a bit over 100 people here, and probably 50 something in San Francisco.
How much are you all in all?
570 or so maybe. Yeah. It's been a lot of emails the last few days, people introducing themselves. So I don't know. I mean, we're hiring a lot.
That's massive.
We're hiring a lot.
That's very massive. Going back to the product, I mean, you have some really exciting things. The marketplace, for example, that you introduced in 2010, and the asset store. Maybe you want to tell us a bit about that. Like the kind of you said that those were the genius moments where you're sitting in the 6th floor or somewhere and having those genius moments of the product in a way.
So that was actually Nicholas, one of the founders, who had that idea. He will claim, though, that he didn't think of it as a business, but just as a sort of a utility. So what we did was, I mean, again, his idea originally, but then we of course evolved it, was basically this, there's a lot of people using Unity. When you're making an interactive 3D world, it needs a lot of stuff, right? It needs like props and characters and animation. It's kind of complicated to do these things, and most people don't have the skills to do these things. So what if people can kind of share these amongst each other? That might be useful. And then we had a kind of a investment banker friend who told us like, you should really charge for that, or you should have like a business model. And so we did that, and we launched it, and it was just absolutely freaking amazing. I mean, it is the most beautiful thing. It's the best. No, seriously, it's the best decision we've ever made, because suddenly it becomes this. I think it's called bricolage. Like it becomes this thing you can sort of just assemble rather than like construct everything from the ground up, and the amount of time it saves people, and the way it opens up, games and interactive 3D to people who just don't have all the skill sets and don't have the money or the scope or the whatever to kind of outsource or hire or contract these things. It's just ridiculous. And we thought about the little guys that don't have the resources, but it turns out the big companies are absolutely equally happy to save like 3-4 days of somebody's work for $50. It's such a no-brainer for them. It's a small business, but it's really great. But more importantly, it just has this insane utility for the community. And there's people that, like hundreds of people that are deriving a significant or all their income from that. We've had people quit their jobs over it just to kind of work on it. It's just fantastic.
Really, really interesting. And actually, I've read Unity is famous for games, but I think it was 30% that are not. I don't know how old the numbers are.
Oh, that's a low number, yeah.
Not coming from games, but have been from other visualizations.
It's more from games now, not because the other stuff shrank, but just because games grew so fast for us. But no, I mean, like, I'm careful with my words, and when I say Unity is sort of a platform for interactive 3D, that's really what I mean, right? It's not a game platform. We call it a game engine, but that's a descriptor for the tech. I mean, it's anything that moves in there can be done, right? And there's a ton of visualization, simulation, civilian and military, engineering and architecture, design, product, art installations. A lot of scientists use Unity to visualize their work, or create 3D worlds that test subjects get to interact with, and there's a wall somewhere with a dog inside it, and you can sort of interact with the dog, but there is no dog, and it's just all this stuff. Visual like VJing, kind of stage shows and stuff like that. It's pretty cool, and I love that. I probably shouldn't say I shouldn't name drop people who don't want to be name dropped, but I was talking to one of the kind of most famous electronic musicians these days who wants to build like a more screen show, kind of, or like a stage show with Unity. Yeah, I mean,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's just awesome. I mean, like, we don't make that much money from it though, because they buy a license or two. I mean, it's a few $1,000s, but still, it's neat.
So now you have this amazing base of game developers on your platform. Where is this going to go?
Yeah, I mean, so Unity is a funny company because we've evolved the business model and hence the strategy so much over the years. Right. So we started with this kind of low-end software business. We sell to people that don't have a lot of money for a little money, and then we do that a lot. Then we expand the base with this freemium model, which is really not that big a difference. It's just more aggressive. But then we start building out so we take it from a software company to kind of an ecosystem company where we have the marketplace. We will have the conferences don't make us that much money, but or don't make us money, but we do a lot of conferences around the world, engage with them, and so on. That's neat. We experimented with some other business models around that, but they didn't necessarily work. And then because it's all these people, now it becomes this platform business, because now we can actually work with the big platforms. So Unity is free for most of the big platforms. So we of course sort of engage deeply with these companies to make that happen. And then it's a longer story, but I'm a very paranoid person, and I was so afraid of. We were all afraid of the end of the growth curve, right? They say this, the best case for a business is an S curve of growth. You always have. That's a great. Most are just flat, but if it's great, it's still gonna be an S curve, and the end of the S curve can have various sort of shapes, but it's never really great. And the sort of best case in that S curve is really that you end up kind of indexing to the growth of an industry, and if it's a high growth industry, maybe you're fine for a few years, but no industry remains high growth for that long, more or less. So we were afraid of that, and we knew it was coming, and we worked really hard, and we hacked it a couple of years. So there was like 2 years where we should have had slowing growth, but we didn't, by just being clever and working hard. But then eventually this had to come to an end somehow. And it's still a growth industry, so the core business is still kind of good, but it's obviously not going to remain high growth, like 100+%. So of course we had to look further, and the biggest sort of segment that we saw growing was ads and social. So we were like, we have to go there, and it was really driven by that paranoia and fear of like kind of tapering out, fear of killing the enterprise value of the company, but also fear of like somehow not being able to invest in the core, because if you stop growing as a business, you stop being able to invest in the tech, and sometimes I think that I think I'm more a technology person than a business person originally, and I'm like from technology's perspective, business model and all the revenue stuff is just a way for the technology to perpetuate itself, and like and it just seemed so sad if Unity couldn't have that. So a year and a bit ago we decided earlier, but a year and a bit ago we went out and we acquired a really amazing Finnish ad tech company called Amplifier, and they had something called Game Ads. Now it's called Unity Ads. And that is now kind of a significant portion of our growth engine. We're still doing well in other stuff, but that's kind of the growth engine now. And the good thing about that is that whereas you could only sort of imagine that you could have, let's say, a couple of $100 million of revenue on the software, what is Facebook doing per quarter in ads? It's like mobile ads. I can't remember, it's $1.3 billion or it's some ridiculous number. And that's, we're not going to match that. I'm not saying that, but it's a very high ceiling that you can grow under. And of course, Google is even more. So, yeah.
And you have a lot of inventory just already on your platform.
So yeah, I mean, like the games are such a high frequency thing. Like people play them a lot. They install a lot of different apps, and it's just this high throughput. It's also very valuable inventory. It's valuable apps. It's valuable audience. So that's a fantastic segment, and yeah, and it's wonderful because it lets us help our developers in new ways.
So you were just saying you are a technology person by heart, and kind of went more and more into this business role, and had this amazing growth phase with Unity. What are the? I mean, it's very different roles of sitting 2 people alone and driving home when the shawarma places are still open, and having a company that has more than 500 employees. Where's kind of your personal kind of, where was the changing point, or where did you see that your role changed a lot?
It changed all the time. Like, I mean, that's the luxury of of being in a high growth company, is that you have a new job every like 3 to 6 months, which is just wonderful because I can't imagine having the same job for too long. And then finally, half a year ago, we hired a new CEO. Who was fantastic, and who I love supporting him and working with him.
Maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about that. How did that come?
Yeah, so I had met him at a conference a while before he joined the board, and some board members will come around once every 3 months and drink coffee with you and sort of quiz you about the company. This guy has only one mode, and that is all in. So like, as a board member, he was with us working with me directly, at least a day per week, sometimes 2 days per week. We traveled together. We did the acquisitions together. He worked very hard with me on that. And we agreed so much of the vision and a lot of the sort of strategy that we've developed in the last couple of years with, focusing on software and services, was very much kind of designed together with him and other people. And he has this insane level of energy. I wanted to move back to Europe at some point, and for various reasons, it made sense that he become a CEO.
But the community, was very critical about it too.
They were worried about it. There's always somebody who's critical, but they were worried, and rightly so, because any change is scary. And we knew that we just.
And it's very different profiles too, right?
He's very different. We agree on almost everything, but we're like, personality-wise, we're so different. but I knew it would be fine. So actually, it was just about surviving that initial criticism, because I knew it would be fine. And now 6 months later, we've made Unity cheaper, or like we've taken more of our stuff and made it free. We've not done any negative things. We've only done like good things. We're investing really heavily in the tech. Like when he was CEO of Electronic Arts, he came in there to kind of, turn the company around, which is a brutal process, and you're firing people and doing this and that. Whereas with Unity, it's not that, and people had to sort of see that he was not going to follow some kind of turnaround playbook. Now it's fine, and give it another half year, people will mostly have forgotten what he did before Unity.
Okay. I've heard you described as being a chaotic person too. Yes. Oh yeah. And I mean that's kind of how do you build such a big organization, because it's really just not a product anymore, it's an organization you build with that personality trait. And on the one side it's kind of this very inspiring and visionary aspect, and on the other side also this structure is kind of something that is needed in those organizations too.
A lot of really awesome people that we hired to work with us, right? Yeah. Very organized people, but also, I mean, you know this, or you'll learn it as you grow, sort of, your businesses. There's absolutely no use in trying to fix our flaws. Like that just doesn't happen. And if it doesn't happen, then you don't have time for it anyway. Like over a decade, you can probably evolve. In fact, I had a decade, so I did evolve. But I didn't have time. Like you never have time in the moment to kind of change and become like better or clever or whatever. So you're just managing around your weaknesses, right? So I was staying out of the structure. I was staying out of finance. I stayed out of a lot of stuff until I was ready. Then I kind of could go back to it a bit and involve myself more. But no, we hired fantastic people, and then. How do you manage such an organization with all these people, all these locations? And a lot of it was just we didn't manage them. Like we just set out some big goals and sort of run this more. If everyone more or less runs in this direction, we'll be fine. And that worked very well. A lot of the time, there was a lot of spillage and a lot of kind of. At some point, I think we had like 3 different Linux ports of Unity, and we hadn't even decided to make a Linux port. Like we had actually decided not to for a long time. And that's sort of what you get when you have a lot of passionate people sort of pointed more or less in the same direction, but very much not in the same direction. It's a good question. I mean, I think whichever flaws we have, we just have to kind of bring them to our businesses or work and just sort of, make them into strengths to some level. Is probably what you can say. I mean, all companies are created in the image of their founders, right? And we were these guys. We had no managerial experience. We didn't want to manage people. In fact, we didn't like structure. We didn't even like process. So of course, for many years, we had no process. We had no management and no structure. Eventually, of course, people are like screaming for it. They're like, nothing works. Can you just give us a little bit of structure? So then you implement the structure, sort of, I think Ben Horowitz says you implement it reluctantly. Like you don't give them too much structure because people want to implement more structure than is good for the organization. So you sort of do it only when it's critical. And I mean, we hadn't read that essay before, but I think that's pretty much what we did.
So your role at Unity changed a lot, and you're in daily operations. You're kind of like not that active anymore, and maybe you want to describe it like where you now and.
Sure. So I mean, I advise the CEO or the board, or the exec team. I'm still on the exec team, but I don't have a portfolio of my own. Like I don't have a revenue line or anything like that. Some spokespersoning for the company, and just somebody who understands the company really well and has a very deep passion for it and sort of a love for the company is a useful person to have around. So I try to make myself useful.
Was it a good time to kind of make that decision? And
yeah, it was pretty good. It was good to come.
Is it hard?
Yes, it is hard.
How do you go?
You get these phantom pains, It's like, you want to do stuff and you're like, no, okay, I have to stay out of that because, it's going to be a mess if I try to engage myself at this point in certain things, like just operational things I shouldn't mess with, and it's fine. No, it's hard and it's strange and it's great because ahead of the time I trusted John, the new CEO, and now I can see he's also, trustworthy. I mean, He's done fantastic work. A lot of the stuff he's doing is stuff I would have done. Much of it better. He's doing better, I mean. and then he has some brilliant insights of his own that he's bringing to the company. So there's some very clever ideas he's come up with that we're working on.
That's great.
Yeah, no, it's pretty fantastic to see. I sort of knew because I knew him pretty well before we made him CEO, but he's doing a fantastic job.
So what is next for you then? I mean, now you have a lot of spare time. I mean,
a bit more spare time anyway.
You have to run to the hospital anytime soon, I guess.
Well,
so that is great to have more time for that, obviously. But I mean, you have been an active advisor and angel in many different ventures before.
Sure.
Many gaming applications. So where's the David go?
I mean, I sort of have this. I mean, I love Unity and I love other entrepreneurs, and I just I have this ridiculous passion for tech people and startups, and that's kind of always been there for a long time anyway. And then when I was CEO, I had to pace myself incredibly carefully because otherwise I was going to spend too much time. And then once in a while, I just fall hard for stuff. So like 3 years ago, I fell really hard for this company called Plain Vanilla with a quiz app. I met the CEO we had lunch in San Francisco. He was visiting there, and
also Icelandic, right? Like
he's Icelandic, yeah. We had some mutual friends. I'd never met him before, and he drew up quiz up on a napkin, and I was like, "Take my money, all the money I had in my bank account at the time."
He must be a good drawer.
It was pretty amazing. He's the best social designer I've ever met. He's ridiculous. So I invested actually all my money. I haven't done an angel investment since then in his company, and then he raised a lot of money from other people, and he's doing very good stuff. And then later I met I'd actually known them since the Nokia days when I was a consultant there 15 years ago. These two guys that had founded a company that is now called Realm.
Y Combinator.
Who entered Y Combinator, and I was just a friend and I don't know. It's kind of too much to say I was an advisor, but I was somebody who would meet with them and chat with them about their business once in a while. And then they asked me to join the board, which I did. And I couldn't resist it. It's just too good a team. The tech is amazing. It's a mobile data store database that makes it easy to code apps that are like robust and like sane against bad network connectivity, which is always a problem. Most apps, when you use them, it's like you tap let's say you go back to the friends list, right? You've been there before, now you go back to the friends list. The app is like, hey server, like who are my friends today? And the server is like, the same as yesterday or same as 5 minutes ago. So here's the JSON file, like here's 50K for you. Parse it, and the app is slow and it's stupid, and if the network goes away, you don't have any friends anymore, and it's just a mess. So they're solving all that. It's beautiful stuff, yeah, that's one of these times I couldn't resist. I'm very careful because I can't really take on too many of these things, but it's fun. I mean, I love working with startups. There's just something about those moments and seeing these kind of crazy. People under this crazy amount of stress, and they have to see the future, they have to see today, and they have to figure all this tech out and all this people stuff out and maybe some money stuff, and it's just people evolve so quickly under that under that pressure, and just being able to spend time with them and help them out a little bit as they go through that, it's freaking amazing.
But that could also be the description of becoming a VC, right? Is that something because I'm pretty sure, I mean, you must have, your email must be, inbox must be popping up every day, like, join us as a VC.
I like VCs. I'm one of the people who has been lucky to only have good experiences with VCs. I've never been treated badly by a VC. Well, yes, in some pitch meetings, but
Any good stories to share?
No, it's just no, it's just not all VCs are very classy people. But I mean,
no name dropping there, I guess.
Nobody you know. I mean, like it's just random people. Most of them are actually gone out of VC now. There was a bubble there too, but. No, I like VCs. I mean, I don't have a career plan for that. I'm very happy with Unity and just sort of doing my thing there. But of course, what I do is I'm sort of a VC with my time because, like I said, I have to be very picky. I have a very limited amount of it. So So I do tend to sort of pick a very few things that I invest in.
Do you miss the early days of Unity? Could you imagine going back to actually?
I don't actually miss the early days of Unity.
Okay.
No, because I was really enjoyed every stage of it, kind of.
Yeah.
And I was a pretty good co-founder. I was a guy who would code, I would market, I would sell, I would support, I would buy hardware, I would fix computers, I would just do whatever it took, which is what all co-founders have to do, and a good co-founder is somebody who's sort of more or less clever at least a few of these things. I was not a very good kind of early stage CEO. When we got to 20 people, we needed structure, we needed organization because we didn't have it, and we needed to have it, and I couldn't do it. And fortunately, we hired good people for that. But I wasn't really impressive at that time. I was a bit flying around. I was trying to figure out the future of the company. I couldn't find it. I hadn't found it, so I was trying to bring some ideas back, and it didn't really stick. And it was kind of not a great time. It's like a year probably was pretty weak. But then as we sort of became this kind of innovation scale company where you can actually invest in projects and do experiment, I really started loving it again. And it really made sense and have a pretty good product sense and sort of and business sense and how that combines. So I mean, like that has been a fantastic period. And still, like, I love the fact that we can do really experimental stuff now. Like we have teams that are working on deep R&D and they're really experimenting, and that just, I mean, that's become a bit of a mantra. This kind of, there's these two things that are often set as opposites, right? There's the early stage of figuring it out and product market fit and these things, and then there is the sort of growth stage, right? And we all visualize the growth stages where you implement process and you've had 1 sale, 2 sales, now you have to have 1,000 sales, so you make it repeatable and systematic, and that's great, and you have to do a lot of that. But the great companies don't just do that, right? They keep themselves at the edge. They keep going back to kind of the experimental phase and so on. And so there's no magic there. Like all the good people do it, but this mental opposition between these two traps your mind into thinking that you should be going from one to the other, whereas that's very important not to. And we've been very good with Unity with that, staying away from getting too operational. So that's something I still relish. Instead of seeing, just these getting a look and getting to work with the people who are doing that deep R&D, and knowing that some of that stuff is going to come out in a year or two. It's just, I love that.
But still not going back to the early phases of Unity.
No, I mean, I love other people's early days. In fact, I get this kind of fetishistic, like, kind of platonic, passionate love for founders. Yeah, there's just something wonderful about that. But actually, I think I had more value of it later. So I try not to kind of join, 3-person startups because it's just, an outside investor or advisor is just not very useful at the time. You just need to kind of, get headspace to work.
Geographically, you're back in Copenhagen after exciting years abroad.
Yeah.
How much do you miss San Francisco? And obviously in the gaming space, Asia, China, important markets too. How is it to be back in Copenhagen? Is it kind of where your immediate future lies?
Yeah, a few years at least. I mean, I love Copenhagen. I feel very much at home here, and there's just, there's family here, especially my wife's family, but there's family here, and it's just amazing.
And tech-wise?
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I mean, it's small. I mean, like, there's not that many good companies, but there are some amazing ones, and more and more. I mean, like, there's definitely growth in this ecosystem, like in most ecosystems. I mean, frankly, the gravity of Silicon Valley has shrunk a lot, right? It used to be there was this massive gravity towards San Francisco, and that's being offset now. I mean, there are actual good companies being built outside of Silicon Valley. Not just in the early days, but sort of longer. The ecosystem is such that people get funded outside. Even Silicon Valley is investing in companies internationally. And then Asia is sort of also providing another gravity well, smaller but still, which is sort of offsetting the whole kind of unipolar or whatever you call it, like world. And that's a good thing. And it makes it kind of sensible to be in Europe, I think. Plus it's so easy, like just get on your bicycle and just sort of cruise everywhere. That's wonderful.
Okay, in that sense, David, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Huge applause. And now I suggest we open open the floor for a couple of questions. So please go ahead. Yes, in the back, over there.
I'm interested to hear more about the ad tech purchase you made with the Finnish company. We're actually working with film studios, doing a lot of stuff in social ad buying. We provide units that help people go through to purchasing tickets online for cinema and for film.
Oh, that's a neat idea, yeah.
So you have content, which is these great games. You also had promotional material, I guess, and then you looked at this ad tech company and thought, well, we'll put the two together. And
I mean, we have access to developers, right? There's a lot of developers who are using our stuff, and frankly, we thought they were not necessarily being always very well served by the ad tech companies or ad networks. You know, it's a messy world. There's a lot of kind of bullshitting and semi-lying and even sometimes straight lying. So not pointing at anyone, of course.
No, I mean, dealing with the agency is...
You just get a lot of kind of fuzzy stuff, right? And so we figured, like, okay, we can create some transparency, we can be useful partners to the developers, and we think by integrating it in Unity and having a big network, we can really add value kind of on all sides. And that's really proven to be the case. I mean, when we acquired that company, they were pretty small. They were growing fast, but they were small. And now they're big, and we paid out millions of dollars to individual developers. Like there's 3 guys in Australia who got several $1 million from just one app they had that had a lot of traffic. But I mean, that was wonderful just to be able to send that money to them. And I think there's 15,000 apps that are like publishers in our network now, and that's growing pretty quickly. So I think it's good for us. It's good for the platform for sure, and it's also good for these developers. I'm not an ad expert, so actually, like when you get to this kind of native ad units and interesting things like selling tickets, like which of course ends up being very local and sort of specialized. I can't speak to it with any authority or cleverness, but I think it's clearly going to be big. I mean, there's so many kind of interesting things that will happen in that world. We have a very simple network now. It's video ads, mostly for other games, which is just something people are willing to pay a lot for. But eventually it will be brand, it will be kind of action-based and stuff like that, absolutely.
Cool. And is that the direction that this company is going in?
Right now we're not working on like things like what you're talking about at all. But it's clear that over time, you will have to sell other stuff in apps. I mean, there will be money coming from outside, that industry to do ad buys. So eventually we'll have to service that need. We're not doing it right now, though.
Yes.
Well, it's the same line as this. I was thinking about also when you're talking about evolving the company now from more or less a gaming engine to be more like thinking about Valve and whole the Steam Power platform where it more or less, I think that's more or less the income from that company. Thinking similar lines, completely.
Not really. I mean, Steam is amazing. Steam is Steam. Steam is sort of such a dominant player on PC. You can't repeat a similar strategy on mobile.
No, but just similar thoughts. Or?
I mean, no. I mean, like just to copy somebody else's model like that. Unless there's some special reason for Unity to do that, I don't think we should do it. I'd never say never, but I mean, I haven't seen the angle that made sense.
How many years do you think that Unity in 10 years time will it be biggest in gaming, or will the other realms of virtual reality and just 3D be the biggest? What do you think?
10 years is a very, very long time, but,
yeah,
but
okay, whatever time frame you
no, but
see it.
sure. Yes, I think we will still be biggest in games in revenue, like because there's a lot of value to be kind of had there, and there's a lot of leverage you have from having a large developer ecosystem. When it comes to other industries, which you always believed in as a business, and we still do, it's less strategic, but it's probably even more valuable to some of these people, because in the game industry has traditionally been able to supply its own tools, whereas when you go to all of these visualization companies and civil and military companies that are creating training and so on, you know, they don't have the tradition of being able to build these tools. So for them to get off-the-shelf tools like Unity is amazing, and we have a lot of usage across all these kind of areas. It's just in order to monetize that in the sort of in a significant way, you kind of have to engage with it and become sort of an integrator, or have a component that is expensive enough to be kind of a line item in an integrator business model. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but these are tricky business models, and it's hard to really build a good business there. So we're happy just to sell it cheap into that world and make not a lot of money, but see kind of every of these big companies use Unity, which is great. But yeah, we haven't necessarily cracked the sort of the strategy there. And then you mentioned VR and AR, which I'm a huge fan of, and I'm such a believer. For me, especially in VR, for friends that I consider cleverer than myself, they believe in more in AR. So I think we're both right, and I think both, and some people even believe, maybe correctly actually, that they will converge to some level. VR will be more for entertainment, AR for industrial applications and data-driven stuff. Those will be massive areas, and what's fantastic is that somewhere between 90 and 100% of these apps are built with Unity. It's ridiculous. Palmer Luckey, the CEO of, founder of Oculus, said at a press conference a month ago or so that 95% approximately of the apps they see for Oculus are built with Unity. And we see the same in AR. That's cool, which means, you know, we will be a big part of that ecosystem one way or another. John, our new CEO, said recently in an interview that, you know, Unity is the biggest company in VR. Sort of, you know, that is also not very well known for it in a way. So yes, that's going to be big. Exactly what form it takes and how the business models are going to be, I really don't know yet. I just know it's going to be huge.
Yes, please.
So there's a bunch of great talk, by the way, super interesting. So there's a bunch of sort of early stage startups here, and you had a lot of good comments on it. What would be your sort of key takeaways for these guys? What would you sort of, you know?
Sure. I mean, when you boil things down to such sort of, you know, few points, it gets a bit repetitive. So sorry if you heard me say this before, but it provably boils down to like insanely hard work and persistence, right? This is a true story. Like, you know, when we were in this incubator, not fifth, but before, there was another incubator which is now bankrupt, but there was like 20 companies there. And they all worked sort of reasonably hard. There was one company that would work every day till like 10, 11 in the evening. They actually went bankrupt, but they're now alive again, and there are a few people, they're doing fine. And then there was one company that just never fucking went home, and that was us, right? I don't know if that's a proof of anything, but and then the last thing is just to kind of have this, you know, high level of ambition, and that gets us a bit silly sometimes when people say like we're the next Facebook or the next Google. So you can do that if you want. I'm not against that, but I don't think that's really valuable. But what is valuable is always to kind of, you know, be pushing sort of, you know, slightly out of reach or maybe significantly out of reach. You know, when we go back, we were all kinds of things we wanted to do that were very ambitious but not necessarily right. But they're always sort of, you know, somewhat unreasonable. When we were 8 employees and 2 interns, we had a developer conference in San Francisco for 3 days. You know, we sold 32 tickets. And somebody came in from Japan and somebody came in from Israel. It was a real thing. And we couldn't pay the catering bills for half a year. So, yeah, and that level of ambition is always kind of, you know, let us bring in really good talent and just sort of focus the mind, you know, slightly. It's a slightly trite, but I mean, it's also true. I mean, these are really important things. That's probably the really only thing you can do when you're early stage. I mean, you have to trust your intuition. You have to trust that you're more or less working on something that's sane or sensible, because otherwise you wouldn't be working on it. So the best, I mean, you just have to raise a tentpole. You have to do something that's so awesome that, you know, a customer wants it or somebody wants to invest in it. Or I mean, you have to sort of, you know, do one kind of, you know, awesome thing. everything else can be broken. Don't worry about marketing or sales or all the other stuff. Just worry about one thing. And maybe that is marketing, but then you can probably ignore tech. I mean, some companies are started like that. So you're just trying to do that, and so you have to more or less trust your intuition. You have to know that you're more or less going in the right direction, and then just work really hard to get that kind of done. Because if you don't, just next thing, I mean, you're done with it anyway. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole methodology of sort of product market fit and lean startup, which I think is very sensible, and you can discuss the details, the edges of it, whether you should do as much as some people say, or a bit less, or whatever. But I mean, that's all very sensible, I think. Like most successful companies, though, we just sort of stumbled through it. We didn't have any sort of strategy for it. Yeah.
Very good.
Different question from my side, very briefly, and then take in a second. Last year there has been so much noise around Unity selling, right?
About that.
About that. I mean, that's kind of a really interesting point. But back then, as far as I know, I think internally you were already kind of stepping down in your lead role. How did that come? I mean, selling a company without like the.
There's like a yearly rumor about the selling stuff.
Yeah.
It's just it's not a thing. I mean, like if I had like $1 for every time there's a rumor, I would like not be rich, but I would like be able to eat a very nice meal. I mean, people just love speculating about that kind of stuff. I have always believed that Unity should remain independent as long as possible, maybe forever. And I think Unity is a company that can do that and could do that. And again, from the technologist perspective, the strongest situation is an independent company that only really wants to invest in itself, right?
Yeah.
So you don't get the money siphoned into some other projects. I know that's only from the technologist perspective. There's other actors in here. There's like the staff and the founders and the VCs and the customers and the sort of people around you. But I think that's a very sensible way of looking at it. And right now we're just executing like crazy, on being an independent company.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Can you tell us why don't you want to, what are the reasons of not making the Unity open source now, especially if some of your competitors are doing it? Like what are the fears?
Yeah, I mean, there isn't really an open source competitor that is of any sort of magnitude, but some people do share the source, yes. Source is the tricky thing. There's all kinds of reasons. We have a lot of other people's source in our source. So there's a lot of kind of edges that are hard to kind of control. I love open source. We use a lot of open source. We're pretty good open source citizens at Unity. We commit back to open source projects, and we even maintain a few of our own. I've always believed that open source was a fantastic thing, but also, again, from a technologist perspective, you need a motor to power its own furtherance and continued growth. And actually, there's very few successful open source companies in this world, and fewer than people think. Actually,
especially in Hungary, since they are not open source, but they share their source with the public. Yeah.
We do, by the way, share our source too to a lot of our customers. But no, it's true. We don't share it to everyone. We do, however, kind of take the responsibility for it, meaning that we work insanely hard to make it very robust. We've gotten our turnaround cycle to bug fixes down to like a few weeks rather than months, so people can really lean on us as a partner that always makes sure that it's fresh. I would love to be able to open source it, but I don't see a good way to do it. And I think we're doing so many things right, in the other way to support it and to maintain it and to make sure it's fresh and good. That is not a significant problem for us.
Yes, please.
Have you, I'm pretty sure that you have a lot of data. Have you considered taking your revenue model even further out and actually have kind of a pay per play? So, everyone would, kind of go and say they pay 0.1 cent per each game, a little bit aligned with the revenue on advertising that you're getting.
It's not an insane idea, but we do actually like the simplicity of selling it to developers and letting them kind of run with it. There's several business models sort of in our industry. One of them is a revenue share based one, which is fine. in some cases, but we actually don't like burdening the business of our customers like that. We prefer, giving them extra revenue if they want, like through the ads and stuff like that. So we basically decided to stick with that and made it work, which all other things being equal, I think is better than the other model.
Just a follow-up question, like how many sessions a day do you run on your engine? Is that something you can...
So the development tool, I don't know. Like I say, we count a bit over 1 million developers on a monthly basis, and they probably have, I think it's like 12 sessions on average per month. So average, of course, meaning there's a few that touch it once, and there's a lot of people who work with it more than full time. Yeah, I don't know how that maps out, but it's a lot of sessions per day for sure. And then when it comes to games, it's probably approximately 1 billion app installs per month of apps built with Unity. My personal guess is actually that it's well over 1 billion, but it's a bit of a triangulation, so it's hard to know. At one point that was, what was it, like a long time ago, I think we had 80 installs per second of apps. But I mean, it's our customers, right? We don't own these apps. But it's pretty fascinating to see that kind of stuff. So we have some data, we have some guesses of what goes on out there. We have an analytics platform that a lot of our developers, customers are adopting, but it's still in beta and we haven't rolled it out fully. Yeah, it's a strange ecosystem, and mobile is so big and so fast growing still, and will remain high growth for a few more years. Like Realm that I work with, the database company. I mean, they can claim truly, but I mean, they can claim this insane thing that they have 100 million installations of their database, right? I mean, how many installations are there of Oracle? I mean, it's like, it's in the tens of thousands. It's more than tens of thousands, but it's, it's in the low millions, say, right? Making them like the second most installed database in the world. What is the biggest one? Well, it's SQLite, which is built into most mobile operating systems. So again, mobile just has a tendency to eclipse everything else that happened before it. And we see the same with games, of course.
Yeah, last question.
Oh. So continuing with these insane numbers, every day your developers, you have 1 million active users per month. They push out hundreds, if not thousands, of games to the app stores.
Yes.
Right. So that creates another problem of discoverability. Mm-hmm. Are you trying to help your developers with that?
Honestly, not. I mean, yes, no. I mean, yes and no. I mean, we do. I mean, we have a pretty awesome network that I didn't actually mention called EveryPlay, where developers can take, gamers can take videos of the games they play and share them with others, which creates a way of organic discovery and distribution, which is cool. And it gives people meaningful uplift. And it's in, I don't know the last number, but a couple of thousand games or so, which is fantastic. And the reason I say we're not solving the problem of discovery is that this does not solve the problem of discovery. It adds to it, it's additive, it's very nice for the people who use it, especially games that are like, photogenic, that like where you can make a clip that actually looks really fun. Not all, I mean, some fun games are not very photogenic, so it's not the perfect solution by any long shot. Advertising is another one. You can buy traffic, you can monetize site traffic. Again, it's not the solution. It's a piece. I honestly don't know if there's a solution. Has there ever been an industry that doesn't have a channel problem? like in the end, everything is a channel problem, and everything is not. You always in every industry you always have a lot of products in the end. Not always. Most industries have a lot of products. There's no really good solution to this. The app platforms, they can work on it. They are sometimes fixing aspects of it, sometimes they break it again. It's a really complex problem. I don't have any really great answer to it.
Well, with your analytics and your ad work, I think you could do some magic.
We are helping, and there are people who are using our stack that are really getting great uplifts and able to monetize the otherwise unmonetizing traffic they have. And these are all valuable things, because with that unmonetizing traffic, you can go and buy other valuable traffic or fund new games or whatever. But again, it's not a full solution. But no, it's definitely an interesting topic. It's something to think about.
Okay, I think it's time to head down to the bar. Again,
No,
David, thank you so much for, once again, let's give a hand to David. If you don't have to leave yet to the hospital, I hope you stay around for a beer.
I'll have a beer,
See you all
absolutely.
guys downstairs.
Until I get a call.
Thank you for coming.
Tak for det. Det var fandme hyggeligt.